Let me introduce you to the class. I think many of them have already seen you during Interact, but some people are still new. So we have about 20 people in the room. Most of them are interaction design MDes students, although we also have some PhD students, some people from our lab, and who else? Yeah, some VC students, and yeah, that's about it. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay, nice to see you all.
And Matt, of course, gave a very nice, very inspiring keynote in the Interact conference that we recently organized. We've been interacting much before that for very many years, almost 10 years now, isn't it? Almost 10 years
Yep.
started interacting. And it's been a wonderful journey. I've been learning a lot of things from him. They have been doing very nice and very interesting experiments every year here in Mumbai. So I really look forward to all his talks. So over to you, Matt. And Matt, we are also recording this, and we are hoping that this will become a useful resource for people to look at from all over the world, particularly those who are interested in ICT4D kind of work. I hope that's okay.
Okay. So, first of all, could you just let me know how many of you saw what I said at the Interact conference? So just stick your hands up, and then I can count you. If you've already seen me speak at Interact, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay, 7, right, okay, so quite a few of you. So what I wanted to do was to use that material, but given that you've already seen the talk, maybe what we should do is, what I could do is perhaps better is reflect on the journey that I've been on with ICT4D and put a bit more emphasis on that rather than thinking about the themes of the Interact talk. Does that work for you?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So, I mean, my background, as all of you know, is mobile computing, and my focus has always been really trying to think innovatively about future technologies. So my starting point as a researcher wasn't around HCI or ICT4D. I guess it was maybe something like 6 years after my PhD that I started to think about development. Up until that point, I was very much simply focused on information access on small screen devices. Because back then, you know, the small screen devices were very limited in terms of the screen and keyboard and things like that. And then in 2000, I moved to, two things happened. I moved to New Zealand, so I had to, you know, try to understand and begin a conversation with a new culture. At the same time, my good friend and collaborator, Gary Marsden, moved to South Africa. And we went between New Zealand and South Africa and vice versa over those early couple of years after we both moved from the UK. So for me, when I was in New Zealand, I started doing some work with indigenous community, so called the Maori, who have very strong oral culture and interesting different ways of looking at things like maps and navigation. Meanwhile, Gary in South Africa was working on technologies for people in townships and in rural parts of Southern Africa. I can see you now, Anirudh. If this is not working, wait.
Oh, it's okay. I'm just trying to get rid of my phone rang. I'm sorry. So.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Yeah, no problem. This is working fine. It's okay.
And so, around that time, 2000-ish, because I've been moving to New Zealand, work with Gary, I started, as you can see from this slide here, working on what we might call traditional human-computer interaction for development. And by that I mean using existing platforms, or perhaps even platforms which people who can afford them and who are literate and who are techno-literate, perhaps yesterday's technologies, and understand how we could imagine those and design those for emergent users. So people with lower literacy, lower technology exposure, lower access to education and financial resources. So the kind of things you're already aware of because you're doing a course on this. And working with a whole range of people, we've done, over that initial several years, we did all sorts of system. Looking at, I showed this slide in Interact. Can you see that slide? Little handsets, green handsets.
No, your screen is doing. The screen is not doing it.
Does it say touch for basic phones?
Now we see.
Okay, so there's quite a delay there. So I won't spend too long on this, but it's just an example of how I was with the teams and with IBM, because it was a spoken web, trying to think about how you give people who haven't got a touchscreen phone some facilities which touchscreen phones give you. In this case, the ability to express gestures, to give operations when accessing a voice-based system. So the slide tells you everything you need to know there. People would tap and scratch on the back of the device to control the system. And we did quite a lot of work, and you have too in IDC, very inspiring work around IVR systems, because those IVR systems were an obvious approach to providing information access, because all you needed was a telephone and all you needed was to know how to press buttons and to talk. So that was a very attractive technology in the early days when doing HCI4D. But you can see this slide now. Can you the IVR problem? And it's again a problem which you're all aware of. You can see a visualization there of a menu structure, but obviously the listener doesn't know what's going on. They are just lost potentially in button presses as they're using the phone. So along with many others, the obvious thing to do there was to think about how we could use physical objects around the user, be it newspapers or government forms or packaging from products, to allow the user to navigate the audio space through a visual metaphor. So the systems that we designed there were ones where you could take a picture of the object, and then over the telephone line there would be very low data bandwidth of coordinates of where you touched, and that would go to a server which would then speak back the information. So instead of you having to make in your mind a big mental picture of what information is where, what we did was to say, well, let's organize it around a paper. Let's take a picture, and when we take a picture, we can look at the image and tap the image. And the bit we tapped, then the system would either read out that information related to that area, or it would do a service based on that. So again, a bit more advanced technology, but still very much about using current technology and thinking how we can adapt it to emergent users. Okay, here's a question from me to you then, because you've been listening. How many weeks have you been doing the course so far?
The second week. Ending the
second week. Second week. So that means you're all experts now, right? Okay. So I've just shown you two systems around using conventional technology for development. Have you come across something else which has really inspired you using conventional technology? Any systems that you've seen, so from other people, from your reading, from your own work? Someone needs to put their hand up. Or I pick the person I can see most directly, which is you. And then the rest of you can help out, right? A lot of brains are whirring there. So I leave that question with you. You know, one of the key things over the last, well, all the way through ICT4D and HCI4D has been to, you know, for good reasons, to look at existing simple technologies, relatively simple technologies, and simple platforms to get information access and services into people who are excluded at the moment. Yeah, and in your reading, you should come across lots of examples like that, where people have worked with communities to directly benefit them in the short and immediate term. And that's very important work and a big tradition of HCI4D. But I put up now this question, can you see it on the slide, about the future? So I think about 5 years ago now, maybe 4 years ago, my thinking moved on a bit. I am still convinced and still try to work to make sure that any ideas and systems we produce have immediate benefit. But I've been drawn more increasingly to thinking about the kind of future that's being built for the whole world, in particular in terms of mobile technology. You know, as I said, I mean, can you see this is one of my earliest systems here? It's just a very simple, one of the simple early mobile phones back in 1994. Yeah. And my role with a company and a team was to try and make that user experience exciting. As you can see, it was quite hard because you had 3 lines of black and white text and a few fiddly keys. We had to work really hard to think about a good user experience. And if you jump forward now to today, you know, the world is very, very different, isn't it? So we've all seen in the, you know, the media, websites, newspapers, whenever Apple has a launch of a product, until recently, people would queue up and they'd get very excited about the future that they have in their hands. Have any of you ever gone to a shop excited? You're about to purchase something and it's really, really, no? Anyone? No kicks around? Anyone queued up? That's because Mumbai is much more sensible than most people around. And you know, when I look, as I said, you know, I've said many times, when I look at a picture like that, part of me is thinking, you know, there's been so much progress in terms of interaction design for mobile devices, and it's been good to be a small part of that in the research and development that our teams have done. So there's a kind of positive feeling, but there's also, for me, a sort of negative feeling. And that comes about from two reasons now. One is I'm wondering what I've done, you know, or helped to do. Have I helped, and are you, you know, all of you probably are going to be able to think and design for the mobile platform, right? That's the platform for the next 10, 15 years. And it's very exciting, but are we together going to make a poorer society? You know, instead of developing people, we are kind of reducing their capabilities. So if you like, it's an interesting irony for me that, you know, I've done HCI for development with communities in India, as Anirudh was saying, you know, in Delhi and Bangalore and Mumbai, and in South Africa, in townships and rural South Africa, and in Kenya, with the aim of helping people have some better world. Meanwhile, maybe when I'm not doing HCI4D and I'm doing just normal mobile interaction design, I'm taking people in the opposite direction. You know, instead of giving them new empowerment and new opportunities for seeing the world differently, maybe if you look at that picture, we're cutting them off from the real world. Or maybe we're designing things that instead of helping people learn new things and to be challenged by new ideas, what we're doing is creating a very fixed, kind of like a tunnel vision on the world that they're looking into. Now this is I'm sure the debate is going on in Mumbai and wider India about social media, fake news. It's certainly a very big thing at the moment in the UK. And government and companies are trying to think about how do we get the benefits of mobile devices and services whilst reducing the negative impacts on society, education, children's mental health, and so on. Now, I'm not a policy maker. I'm not a member of government. So I think I've been thinking about, well, what can someone like me, someone like you do to avoid the negatives of the future technology whilst trying to build things which are going to uplift the general world rather than any particular one community. And I think I've been thinking about this intensely now for the last couple of years, and I think, you know, one of the problems that we have with technology is that it comes from a very singular perspective, and I call that perspective California, but I don't mean simply the place California. You know, I would count probably, you know, your lifestyles, my lifestyles, as being very Californian. Okay, we inhabit a world, a space which is privileged. Most of us. We inhabit a world where the future is optimistic and technocentric, where the sun shines and everybody seems healthy and everybody's smiling and money is being made. And, you know, I don't want to I don't want to make people feel bad about that. You know, if you're happy and you're making money and the sun is shining, you know, be thankful, count your blessings. But I think our technology is being driven by just that one mindset. And you know, you can look at all sorts of technology these days, and they have those magic words on them. You know, designed in California. And I'd argue that it's not just a case of designed in the sense of the place, but the mindset, the ethos, the values of California, and remember, you are all Californian, are being designed into this technology. Okay? And therefore, flavoring this technology with a particular set of values, ethos, mindset. So, with that argument in my head, I've then re-seen the work that my team and others have been doing with emergent users. Because what I think we've been able to do, or begin to do, is to, instead of simply saying we're going to make solutions for particular communities, you know, townships, or rural India, or the people who live in Dharavi who've got low literacy, we can say we want to try to begin to blend these different value systems, worldviews, into the way in which the future is constructed. So obviously it's a bit of that's a big challenge, and we've only just started to do it. But the perspective is to work with people in these communities and ask them to think about further out future technology. So instead of saying, what problem can we solve for you today? And then being good software engineers, being good designers, design something. We sit like we are in this room now, and we begin to explore, you know, if there weren't constraints, if it wasn't a mobile phone, if it wasn't something that had to be powered by a battery, all sorts of things, then what type of modality, form factor, costs, all sorts of things would you imagine? Now, looking around the table here, I can see people who've helped us very directly in this. So I am, you know, if after this talk you want to get someone to interpret the nonsense I was saying, I can see several people, and of course, Professor Joshi being a key one there, will be able to unpack what we're saying in examples. I want to try you out now on this. So can you see a picture there of a group of people sitting around a table?
No.
Okay?
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
are they on your screen? Yep.
Yes.
And it looks like they're doing an exam, right? They're not. So these people are people we've worked with for a while in Cape Town, and we're in a place called Langa, which is a township about 20 minutes drive from the centre of Cape Town. Now, if you've ever been or seen pictures of Cape Town, the centre is very, very, very affluent. It's like, you know, London, but very sunny and warm and nice. And then you go 20 minutes towards the airport, and you'll get these kind of shanty homes. Some of them built better than others, but quite a lot of them with corrugated iron. But you know the kind of things from your own context, say with Darby. Probably a lot less densely populated than somewhere like Darby. And what we're doing here is we've asked, these are people who live in the community. They have, on the whole, lower level of literacy, but more literate, say, than some of the people we worked in India. Most are completely unemployed and they have low incomes. And most of them, as you can see from the pictures of the phones they got at that time, had lower end technology. Look on the table, you can see their kind of feature phone or dumb. And I was asking them to draw a picture of a device that would allow them to feel more safe and secure when they were using it. And the reason we were asking them this is because we'd done some workshops in Kenya and in India and in South Africa previously, and one of the big issues was people wanted to be able to get things like notifications, messages, without drawing attention to themselves. Because if they drew attention to themselves, they would either be mugged, they would have the phone stolen, or in the case of a group we worked in Bangalore, Women's Collective, if they used the phone when they're meant to be working, a woman reported to us that she would be beaten by her employer because he saw that as wasting the time, right? So how do we design something so it is still usable, but draws less attention to the user? What I'd like you to do now, just for a couple of minutes, and maybe you want to do it in a pair review, get a piece of paper, and I want you to imagine you sitting around that table with those people, and your design brief is, you can pick any form factor, any material, anything futuristic. What would you design? Something to give the user more security, but still allow them to get their messages, notifications, and so on. Is that clear? It's a very open design brief, and I'm going to watch you as you perhaps work together, have a chat. You can talk about something else if this has confused you, and then let's see let's just have 2 to 3 minutes. I want to see some of these designs that you've got with, and think futuristically. Okay?
I'm going to take you around on the phone.
So you have to design a device that can make you feel secure
and safe.
Yes.
Without drawing attention.
Secure when you're using it in a public place. So say you were walking down the street or sitting in a cafe or on public transport, and the context for these people was that they couldn't do that. And in say Nairobi, as soon as you bring the phone out, it could be snatched away. So how do you enable people to use mobile communication, whatever you want that to be, while it is more secure or makes the user feel more safe about using it?
It could be anything.
And
Look like
those of you who worked on some ideas with us on this, you can't cheat and do the same idea.
we can't do it. It should be
Okay. I think I saw Sharon there.
prone to head.
You can ask. The question is, do you design a new device or a mechanism to just hold your phone? Is that a question?
It's highly open. So I've told you exactly what we said to the participants in Cape Town and in the other places. So just design something so it would make you, in that context, feel more safe, secure, able to use it in public, but still be useful. So don't design something which is like a just a box with a safe, because you can't use it. All right, that's all the time you get. Does anyone have anything they would like to share?
The water bottle?
Yeah.
Do you see that?
Right, okay, so if you've got something, no, I see a red box, similar. Okay, we just have a quick look. Okay, now, perhaps if you hold it up to the rest of the group, and then you could explain your idea.
Right.
Okay, what have we got this one?
This is something.
Mike, it's there. You want to speak up.
So you could have this in the palm of your hands. So maybe only after you do some sort of a gesture, it would actually show the screen. So this would also, I mean,
Okay.
someone would be able to snatch it from you. It would always be there.
Is it more a glove?
Yeah, I didn't think of it as a glove, but it could perhaps be like a glove, sort of a band around it. Maybe hold it together.
And it's invisible before you gesture.
Yeah. Only on a certain gesture it would open up.
Cool. Oh, that's a nice idea.
So this is
What else have we got?
a flexible kind of thing, which is flexible, which can attach to hands, and it is completely flexible. We can attach anywhere, like here, or over here if you want, while jogging. And there is something, one more idea, which is a kind of tattoo, which we can place in your hand, and we can interface through it. And there is also a sort of device which will help to track that interface.
Oh, good. So again, you can hide it under your sleeve, perhaps, right?
Yes.
Cool. Okay.
So,
While you're sketching there, I just put it. Have you got one? Anyone else want to share?
Anybody else? Yeah.
one idea, ma'am. Is that this is basically like a normal cloth that's there. Where the only difference is that when they want to use it, they just stretch it out, and your very simple interface comes out, and then they fold it back and put it in your pocket. So the idea that it says
Cool.
cloth, that's it.
That's a very nice idea. Yeah. Again, hiding it away, right? Okay. So I don't know if you can see this example on the screen. Is there a slide showing security?
Yes.
You can see the image on the screen.
Yes.
Okay, so this is one of the drawings that a participant in Nairobi did when we asked this question. And what it is a physical form factor where the actual phone looks like a hand. And the idea is that when you put the phone down, from a distance, this was the thinking of the participant, from a distance it would look like someone was holding on to the phone, so that the robber wouldn't come and try and snatch it away. So they were, trying to use their context to design those form factors. Similarly, tell me when the next slide is shown. Have you got a new slide on the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. These are sketches from Bangalore, from the women's collective I told you about. So these are the domestic help that go from house to house to do cleaning. And they very much wanted to keep in touch with their loved ones when they were on the move. So they were thinking about, a bit like you were thinking, you know, some discreet wearable on a ring. They also had hairband. So when you brush your hair, it looks like brushing your hair, but in fact you're connecting with your partner, your husband, whatever. Those things, you know, by going along to those groups, a number of things happen for us, I think. One is we get insights and ideas that we hadn't really thought about in terms of form factor and interaction design. But it also makes us think about how do these needs, future views, relate to the rest of the world. So you remember that I said I've moved on my journey from ICT4D from trying to solve in isolation or work with the issues of developing communities, emergent communities, to expanding out the viewpoints to work with these communities to inform the rest of the world. Okay? And so in this case, what this work has helped us do is to think about, well, a lot of people around the world want to be able to use their mobile phone, but they don't want it to dominate everything that's happening in their social context. So you should see now, in a second, a picture of a mobile phone on a table.
Yes.
Can you see that? And I want you to, when you finish today and tomorrow, I want you just to keep a sort of either a proper physical diary or a mental diary of all the times that either you or your friends, your classmates, put the mobile phone down in a social context or are using it in a social context. If you're like most people, I think your diary will be very full. Okay? You will notice many times when this thing seems to become the most important thing. And that's, I would say, a big challenge, right? A remarkable challenge to designers, because, you know, designers have always wanted to make seductive, entrancing objects. You know, if you're a furniture designer, you want people to look at the furniture, enjoy the aesthetic, sit down in the furniture, enjoy it. But can you imagine now, you can see my chair here, right? Yeah? Imagine I come into my room, and you're all in the room with me, and I look at that chair, and I sit into it, and at this point, I am in a different world. The world of the chair. You lot are all trying to interact, right? But I am, oh, look, I got levers, I go up and I can go down, I can spin around. Now, designers of chairs want you to enjoy them, but they don't want you to be kind of like fixated by them. Similarly with this cup. You know, I'm enjoying this coffee. But if I spent the next 5 minutes sort of completely in a dream because there's coffee, you would think I'm a bit, you know, away with the fairies. Let's try it. It's strange, isn't it? Completely strange. Meanwhile, some of you probably because you don't understand the talk, are sitting there going like this. Look around now. Have a look around the room. Yes, there we are. Okay, maybe not. But try and think about your design viewpoint. Designers want their products to be noticed. Okay, designers want their products to be appreciated. Bad designers want to, I think, entrap you. And then you're not designing something, you're creating a drug. So I would say a current mobile phone is always present. And so we've been thinking about learning from the people in Cape Town, learning from the people in Nairobi, learning from the people in India. How could we make this device blend in to the situation? So that when you are putting it down on the table, or you are holding it in your palm, it doesn't immediately draw everyone else to it, or the user to it. And you can look at the videos later, so I'll send some links to Anirudh. But what we did was to create and begin some ideas where a phone could camouflage itself, try to look at the image that was underneath it and blend into that background. So on this slide, can you see the thing here which says the chameleon prototype? Has that come up yet?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
It is there.
Okay, so where is the mobile phone?
What you can't get.
It isn't fully hidden. Can you see it?
It is there.
The guy
Yeah, it's on the Kai thing. And so what we had was learning from the communities we worked with, was learning from trying to do two things. One, so the phone would try to disappear into the background. And the second was that when messages came in, the phone would would use different parts of the background, different colors, to indicate, say, a WhatsApp or a Facebook or a phone message. So just taking the insights from the emergent users and seeing how that can help everyone in the world. We've got many, thanks to the fact that we've worked with IDC and with colleagues in Africa, we've got lots of examples where we have worked with emergent users but told them that they are helping to create the future for a much bigger picture. And it's been really, really, really eye-opening for me, and I think a really good way of getting new innovation into the world of mobile design. We've got a couple of more things we'll be presenting this year in the big Kai conference, which again, Shashank, Professor Joshi and others in the room have been helping us with. I think I want to, I know we've got about 10 minutes left and I want some time for questions, okay? But I was trying to think about what's the most useful thing I can say to you. And I mean, I'm involved in ICT4D, and I've got to be honest here, right? I've never been involved because I feel like I want to do good, okay? I'm not driven by a social conscience, which is probably a bad thing, but I'm being honest here, right? As I said at the start of the talk, I've been driven in research by new ideas. You know, I want to think about new interaction designs, new materials, new ways of presenting information, and I want to do that with interesting people and interesting contexts. Usually, researchers and, you know, like us, the interesting people are other research groups, and the interesting contexts are often, labs. What I would communicate to you is that there is on your doorstep, as you know, as you pass every day, India is one of the most fascinatingly diverse countries in the world. So if you believe me that there's a need to get new perspectives into global design, then it is it Modi who has the phrase "Make in India"? Yeah, is that still something he's talking about? Yeah, and that's great. But this is the challenge then. So, "Make in India," one interpretation means produce things in India, right? Just like we say, designed in California. My challenge to you is to say, when you do design and you think about make in India, think about that word in as into. So if you're creating a mobile phone service, a device, a chair, a cup, what are the values, the perspectives, the visual culture, the languages that surround you, and how can that, if you embody it in a design, disrupt what I think is at the moment, a dull future, except for the back of my device where I have a bit of India. And those of you who've met my family will know that's Claire and Ben and Rosie and Sam. And I'll stop there, and if you have some questions, we can answer them. If not, you could go to bed and have some meals. So thank you.
Questions?
Hi.
So, two questions from your paper, Beyond Yesterday's Tomorrow.
Yeah.
So in the paper you've explored and brilliantly conducted the participatory design process, and while you conducted this process you came across certain social constructs that evolved right from when you interviewed women at Bangalore, the auto drivers again at Bangalore, at the same time the school children. My question is, while we have this diverse social construct, how can we make a collective decision from the participatory design process? Because the social construct that exists is different in most cases, and contributing, say, to a global design factor or design into, how do we make a collective decision from our participatory design process? That is one question.
George, let me deal with that question first, because that's a very excellent question. I would say the answer is at least twofold from my perspective. Firstly, in that paper, I'm not sure if we just describe it, but what we do is when we go from either in one country, from one context to another context, or from one country to another country, we try to circulate the ideas and contexts that we're seeing to those other contexts. And we deliberately then, in each step of the participatory design, see how people respond. And sometimes they'll say, well, that's not relevant to our context, or it makes them think about their context in a different way. So, for example, with the chameleon phone, it's absolutely the case that the Nairobi community was much more concerned about security, physical security, than people who worked in say, Bangalore. There was less worry in Bangalore about you pulled your phone, it gets snatched. There was more interest in Bangalore about security from a different angle, in the sense of being able to be in control of your technology when perhaps your employer doesn't want you to. So that's a different twist, and by going between places, I think we get a kind of meshing together of ideas. The other answer is, a lot of what we're doing is, it is participatory design, but it's always framed for our users about the future. So it's not even necessarily about them, it's about their children's future. And I think that's a very interesting dynamic, because you're then involving them in idea generation rather than getting them to only think about their current context. What it also does too is, like if I ask you to imagine your future in 10 years' time, you might describe your situation where many things have changed. But you might also tell me about things you think are going to be the same. And you might find with some of the communities we've worked in that they can't imagine how their children's children are going to be fully educated or fully accessed to money. And that's an interesting question then. You know, in terms of development, you know, what things do people have hope for, and what things do people feel, doesn't matter what the government does, it doesn't matter what technology you build, I will always be living in this slum. Because that then gives us some development questions as well as technology questions. You had a second question?
Yes. The second question basically came to my mind after attending lectures of previous professors. The question is, when we design into, and specifically when you ask the question, a new perspective on these users, do we design to adapt to a user's need, or do we design to change the behavior? Because this was a question that was been thrown here and there with most of our discussions with previous. I would like to know your take on this. So do we design to change people's behavior in the future, or do we design to adapt to the behavior that they have in the future? Because if we are talking about the future and we are designing into, do we design to change, or we design to adapt? And yes, both the words can be switched in, but I would like a solid separation as to why we shouldn't do one process and why we should do one.
I think that's a very interesting and challenging question. I think I can't tell you about, or I can't give you what your perspective should be. Right? I can tell you what I think. I am convinced, I'm a bit older than, only a slightly bit older than most of you in this room, and I would say there's a saying here, you know, there's nothing new under the sun. Right? And what that means is, that's not a negative, right? You know, it doesn't matter what happens in the world, nothing changes. Of course, things are changing all the time. But in terms of human needs, values, and outlook, I think you'll find it isn't just the traditional person in your society that has things which are generational. All of you will, I imagine, want to form strong friendships and relationships. Okay? All of you probably will have a desire to sort of help and serve others. All of you will also want to advance yourself in some way, however you define that. And so when I'm thinking about designing the future, it's more that I look at the sort of new opportunities technologies afford, be that new physical materials that are coming out of labs, new networking, new battery materials, whatever it is. I mean, I'm really tuned into thinking about how those materials are going to construct places for us to live in the future. I mean, just think about the way we live in cities. Now, cities in all of our countries have been important for millennia. Okay, why is that? Because people want to come together, they want to trade, they want to entertain. Cities have changed in many ways in the last millennia. Different building materials, different transportation, but the basics of a city are the same. The attraction of the city is the same. So I see that with the digital habitats that we're building. I think people will want to connect, communicate, share, laugh, relate, emphasize, grieve, pay, do business. And in designing for the future, I'm thinking about those. We don't have to invent what are important to people. Okay, we know it. There's nothing new under the sun. But the technologies are changing, and how does that make it more efficient, more affordable, more accessible? Because I would say this is a challenge, and I'm going to run out of time soon. If after today you can think of one thing that you could do, or you think the world can do now, which you couldn't do before the mobile phone. Now obviously it can do it quicker, and it can do it for more people with a mobile phone, but is there really anything as new given the technology? When I wanted a cab before, I stand outside the street, wave my arm, it comes within seconds. Now I use this, and in Mumbai it takes 5 minutes. Aniruddha, I badly timed a meeting in about 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Is that okay? So if there's another question, that'd be great. I will try and answer it.
Sure. Any other questions? Any last questions? Yeah, Angela, go ahead. Quickly.
Hello.
My question was, sometimes I feel that it's also because of the form of the kind of devices that we use that people tend to get addicted to it. For example, if you don't use your phone or if you don't use your laptop, you totally feel disconnected. So my question was,
Yeah.
what is the future of personal digital assistants, like all these devices? And with the beginning of elimination of screens and the evolution of AR and VR, how do you think this whole scenario will change? And even wearables. Because the main aim of people is to just stay connected most of the time.
Yes, I mean this form factor is particularly addictive because you have to attend to it. You look down at the screen, right, and you have to use your attention and your finger, which takes you away from the world. And in fact, this kind of addiction, it's almost physically addictive in terms of touch. So the question is, if we have a device where, like some advanced version of Google Glass, where I can get information without having to take my eyes off the situation, is that better?
Yeah.
Or if I can just talk, maybe sub-vocally, so that you can't hear me, but I get an answer, is that better? I tend to, I think it will give some benefits, but we're still. I mean, the big challenge, I think, is what do we hold most dear? Do we hold the digital world most dear, or the physical world the most dear, most special? And I'd say that the physical world is a great gift. Okay, I know that I spend a lot of my day with my head facing down towards the phone, where around me birds are twittering and people are walking and there are smell, and I'm completely oblivious to it. But I'm also aware that I can, if I'm thinking about my son, which I'm there, and he's in London in university, just by a tap of this machine, I can WhatsApp him. So, and that's a huge benefit. So it is a big challenge, and I'm not giving you any answers. I think around places like houses, we might see people doing more interaction. We already see people doing more interactions with things like, this, the Alexa. Yeah. And speech is a more inclusive technology. So if I'm in my room and I say, Alexa, what time is it in Mumbai? Alexa, what time is it in Mumbai?
The time in Mumbai is 8:02 p.m.
That's a different form of relationship between this and me and you. You heard me say it, you heard it say it. It wasn't secretly done on this device. So I think in the house, or maybe in the workplace, we'll see more spoken interaction. But then the design challenge is, how do you make things like this so they're more like us? So at the moment it tends to be designed so I speak, you can hear me speak and you can hear the answer, but it's really a one-to-one. You know, it's not like it's one of you sitting around the table. So if you're interested in voice interfaces, there's a lot of things that can be done.
Thank you.
I have run out of time, Anirudh. I just wanted to say thank you very much for you. I know you have changed your schedule and it is late for you. Thank you for doing that. It is always a great joy to see Mumbai, if not to be there. I'm coming to Mumbai. I hope you know this, Anirudh. I'm coming on March the 2nd.
Yes.
With, I think it's Thomas, probably Thomas and Jen. So if I said things today which you are disagreeing with, you agree with, you want to follow up, then I'm very happy to schedule some time for the group. Because your team, your students have been a huge inspiration to me personally and to our group, and it's a great joy to see you again.
Great, and thank you very much for taking out the time today. It was wonderful. And it was a brilliant idea to use 2 connections. It gives you more flexibility.
And thank you all. Enjoy your evening. Bye.